Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Old Time Boxing Show is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation and MyBookie.ag. To find out more information about the Retired Boxers Foundation, go to Facebook. Look them up there. Alex Ramos is one of the guys that started that. A good friend of the show. Make sure you check that out. Also, for MyBookie.ag, you can go on and click the banner on thegruelingtruth.net. We'll take you there if you want to bet on some fights in the future or if you want to bet on the NFL playoffs coming up this weekend. I'm your host for the Old Time Boxing Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host, the Grueling Truth's boxing historian, Christopher Shelton. How you doing, Chris?
Good. This is a great topic, and it's going to be a lot of fun today.
Yeah, most definitely. The topic today is the life and career of Rocky Marciano. And just from doing the research over the last few days, Christopher, this is a very interesting boxer. And like so many other boxers, he grew up tough, wasn't real rich, was raised on the south side of Brockton, Massachusetts by his parents. Both were immigrants from Italy. And I think the big thing that you get about him was he was a really good athlete. He was a baseball, he was a football player. I think he had dreams of being a major league catcher, which didn't go through. But I think when you look at his life and look at his parents and how he was raised, I think that's how you got the tough man who put in more work than everybody else. And basically, the thing that made Rocky Marciano great was he was just relentless.
Yeah, something happened involving his arm in his baseball career. It didn't seem to hurt him as a boxer. And you're right, he had a mom that, said, this is a big baby, and I just slap around a little bit. And I love that. Rocky Marciano, a good athlete, worked really hard in his training. It was fun to watch him because he just walks in there like a bear and just clubs away and throws punches relentlessly with nonstop energy, no matter who he faces.
Yeah, and right now I want to send a shout-out. I just got a message from a former world champion, Vinny Pazienza, who's listening to the show. So we want to send out a shout-out to the Pazmanian Devil, or Vinny Paz. He'll get mad at me if I call him Pazienza now. But so let's start from the beginning here. As we talked a little bit about his early life, I know in March of 1943, he was drafted into the United States Army for a term of 2 years. He was stationed in Wales. He helped ferry supplies across the English Channel to Normandy. After war ended, he completed his service in March of 1946. He had a short amateur career. He was 8-4, and he represented the Army and won the 1946 Amateur Armed Forces Boxing Tournament. But I think it's safe to say here that Marciano's style was not really conducive to amateur boxing, Chris.
No, it probably wasn't because I love talking to the military guys about why we have boxing in the military and things like that. It's very disciplined, and Marciano's really not. He's a hard worker. He's not the most disciplined sort of boxer. But I also think that it's interesting that I don't think he knew what he was going to do with his life. I think he was a good athlete, and he kind of thought that in a general way. I'm not sure he thought it was going to turn to boxing or that the military was going to be his path toward what might be a box. The military will help you if you want to try to fight for the Olympics and stuff. He wasn't like that. But he did fight a little bit, and then he just sort of figured out, I guess this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and it seems like the majority of these guys, a lot of them got their starts. We had Mike Weaver on the Legends of Boxing show a few weeks ago. He had no intention of ever being a boxer. He goes into the military, and before you know it, you got a guy that ends up being a WBA heavyweight champion. When you look at Marciano, his career started March 17th in 1947. That night, he'd knocked out Lee Epperson in 3 rounds. And in an unusual move, Marciano returned to the amateur ranks and fought in the Golden Gloves after that. And he lost to Coley Wallace, who wasn't Coley Wallace in the movie The Joe Louis Story?
Well, it's very unusual that you say that because you're right that I usually think that in my mind that you fight as an amateur, and then the minute you have your first professional fight, you lose your amateur status. But that didn't happen with Marciano. Marciano did fight one professional fight at least, and then went back as an amateur. And that seems unusual, at least for the way we look at amateurs and professionals today.
Yeah, and when you look at him, he starts off his career with, he's knocking guys out left and right.
Yep.
Nobody goes the distance with him for, a few years here at least. And you look at him, he runs through 47 undefeated, 48 undefeated, 49 undefeated. The competition was not real stiff. The first guy that I'd really heard of that he fought was Ted Lowry. And Lowry was a tough guy. I think when he fought Marciano, he was 63 and 49. And I think they fought a couple times even. And Lowry actually goes the distance with him. And I think it was
Goes distance twice.
Yeah, and the thing is, in the second fight, it was Lowry, not Marciano, who was on the verge of scoring an early knockout. He hurt Marciano with 2 great rights in the first round, rocked him in the second, and I think put it like this, there weren't many people that thought they were looking at a future world heavyweight champion.
No, styles make fights, and Ted Lowry gave Rocky Marciano something to think about. There's only 3 guys that Marciano didn't knock out, and this is one of them, and he did it twice. And, thank God for him because, I got to read up on him a little bit. And he published his memoir, and that's his thing. Hey, I hung in there with Rocky Marciano. I think I beat him. I don't know if he did, but you know what? I love it. I love these guys who are boxers, and that's his claim to fame. He hung in there with Marciano 20 rounds, and Marciano couldn't put him out.
Yeah, and next up you get Madison Square Garden. I think it was December 30th, 1949. Carmen Vingo. And Vingo, this was a back-and-forth war that Marciano later described as the toughest fight of his career. Vingo was down for a count of 9 in the first round from 2 left hooks. Marciano put him down for another 9 count in round 2, but Vingo fought back furiously, hurt Marciano with some solid rights, and he still seemed pretty strong at the end of the 5th, the referee said of Vingo. But Vingo goes down into 6, loses consciousness, lapsed into a coma at the hospital. He was even administered last rites by a priest. And from everything I read, this really affected Marciano, who was seen to be pacing up and down the corridors of the hospital, praying to God to spare his opponent's life. Fortunately, Vingo did pull through. By early February of 1950, he'd been discharged from the hospital. However, he was left slightly paralyzed on one side and never boxed again. And the only thing I could really find from that fight was a brief clip on YouTube. But from everything I've read from reading like the Rocky Marciano biography, that this almost ended Rocky's career early. It affected him so much.
Well, Marciano, the thing is, we come into it with our own emotions. We watch these things, and Marciano comes across as a real likable guy. He's also a guy that's always fighting a little under 200 pounds, and he hits hard, and he really hits you in a way that you're dazed, when he hits you. And, he inflicted damage on people, and, it's tough because he's trying to build a career. He's trying to get his mama home, and he's trying to do things, and yet I don't think he really wants to injure and hurt these people, but he really doesn't know anything else. And he's decided, this is what I'm going to do with my life, and I got to hit guys really, really hard, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah, and then you get maybe the closest he ever came to losing, which was his first fight with Roland Lastarza. That was a fight that was basically scored even, and he ended up winning on a supplemental points decision. Lastarza came into the fight at 37-0, and I think a lot of people really, I think people as general boxing fans really thought this would be Marciano's first loss. Marciano did knock him down once, which back then didn't count for extra points the way it does today. But Lastarza was a tough fighter and gave Marciano everything.
Good boxer.
Yeah, he gave Marciano everything.
Yeah, it is very interesting when you're dealing with everybody's scoring system is a little different. And yes, that first fight with Lastarza, it was 5-4-1 Marciano, 5-4-1 Lastarza, 5-5 even referee, and then that's a draw. But then there's a supplemental system, and Marciano's knockdown had an effect on, we're giving it to Marciano. And I kind of like that, actually. I think when it's really close, if somebody scores a knockdown, that should be considered. And yet sometimes the way they did it back then, it was just in rounds. So even if you scored a knockdown, you didn't get a 10-8 round like you would now. It was even though, you know what, I don't know. I think a knockdown is a 10-8 or should be. And then the second fight they had, Starza, gave him a lot for about 6 rounds and had one judge's card was 5-1, and then I think he was 4-2 on another and 3-3. It was pretty even, but then Marciano's just relentless and pounding you down. Finally knocks the Stars down and knocks him out, so at least it doesn't go to the judges anymore. The Stars is very unhappy he lost that first bout and was upset about it for the next 50 years, but it doesn't matter. It was very close, and if nothing else, you can't take something of that away from Marciano. If you're going to beat him. Don't make it close and you got some kind of edge because of the judges or something.
Yeah, and his next big fight was against Rex Lane at Madison Square Garden. Lane actually went into the fight at 34-1. It was an 11-5 betting favorite. Crowd of like 13,000 showed up, and one of the more devastating knockouts you're going to see. Marciano hit Lane on the chin with an overhand right early in the 6th round. After a delayed reaction, Lane fell to the canvas, face forward in a hunch position. Once he hit the canvas, he just kind of rolled over and was counted out. I think this is a fight where people really started to think that Marciano was a legit contender.
Yeah, absolutely. It was before he fought Lewis, but it was the first time where, and Lane was the favorite going into the fight. But when Marciano's done with him, Rex Lane is in the fetal position on the canvas and just looks dead, and that's sometimes what Marciano could do to an opponent. And you're right, he did it to Rex Lane. It was on a New York City, the big stage, Madison Square Garden and all that, and Rex Lane just looks dead in a fetal position on canvas, and all of a sudden you're like, who is this guy? He's not just this. The reputation with Marciano, which always stayed with him, is, hey, this guy can't box. He's just a clod. He hits hard, but the minute he faces somebody, a real boxer, he's going to have troubles. And yet Marciano always seemed to persevere.
Yeah, and then next up, you get, of course, the legendary final bout for Joe Louis at Madison Square Garden in front of 17,000 people. Actually, going into that fight, I did not know this until doing the research for the show, but Louis was a 6.5-5 betting favorite. Louis actually did well in the early rounds, but Louis was knocked down by a left hook in the 8th round. He got to one knee at the count of 3 and took a standing 8 before getting up. Marciano moved him for the kill, one of the great finishers in boxing history. And he entered the fight with a right that sent Louis through the ropes onto the ring apron. And actually, if you look at the scorecards, Ruby Goldstein had it 4-2 for Louis at the time. The other two had it 5-2 and 4-3 for Louis at the time. So Marciano, still people were doubting him because it's an old Joe Louis, and even though he was the underdog, the way he won still didn't convince people.
Well, I think it was a thankless one for Marciano. He did walk into there 26 pounds underweight, facing a foot difference in reach. I mean, he's really at a deficit facing Joe Louis, even if it's Joe Louis's ultimate last fight. And Louis wins as far as the 6th round. He won the 6th round in the 8th round ending. But yeah, the way Marciano took him out, knocked him unconscious and through the ropes, and it was just vicious and brutal. Not that Marciano did anything wrong, but then it was like, oh, Joe Louis, hey, come on, he just had to do this for taxes. He didn't really, you shouldn't have put him out there against Marciano, even though Marciano was the underdog. It's like the tax man did this to Joe Louis, and Rocky Marciano, don't give him any credit for this because he didn't take on the real Joe Louis. He took on an old man, even though Walcott was the same age as Louis and won a championship after that or in that area. But devastating knockout. And it was awful. It was awful for people who loved Joe Louis, respected Joe Louis, to see him knock through the ropes, completely unconscious. And they had to do this because of the tax man. It didn't help Marciano's reputation, even though Marciano did nothing wrong. That's who he had to fight, and he did what he had to do.
Yeah, and then next up he fought Lee Savold, who was a heavyweight that had been a contender for a while, fought Joe Louis, had like 150 career fights and won over 100 of them. And Savold said after the fight that a fighter has to have his annuities paid up before going against Rocky Marciano. And Marciano left him a bloody mess in the 7th round when his cornerman jumped in to save him. And I think the one thing that really stands out to me is how many boxers the last time they fought was against Rocky Marciano.
God damn it. I love you, Mike, because that's what I was thinking, too, that they fought Rocky Marciano, and they didn't want to do it ever again. And they had fought like 100 times. Archie Moore, some of these guys were 200 times. Archie Moore fought again after Marciano, but some of these guys fought a lot of times, and after they fought Rocky Marciano, they said, I'm not doing it again. That's it. This is too brutal. It's too awful. It's too vicious, and that's what Rocky Marciano did to you. And you're right. That it struck me, too, without talking to you ahead of time, that they fought Rocky Marciano, and they said, shit, I ain't doing this ever again. More than a few fighters had that experience.
Yeah, and then next up you get Harry Kid Matthews, who was a ranked contender. 31,000 showed up, Yankee Stadium. I mean, you can see that Marciano is just starting to get bigger and bigger, kind of like the Tyson effect. When you're knocking people out with one shot, people want to see that. And he earned his September title shot of that year against Jersey Joe Walcott, where he comes in. Rocky's 42-0, 42 knockouts, and he ends up with dumping Harry Matthews flat on his back in his own corner, almost in the lap of his manager, Jack Hurley, with 2 thundering hooks. And this was a fight that by now, I think, this fight, when you watch it, he looks a little like Jack Dempsey, or the Jack Dempsey style of attack, where he's weaving low, coming up, throwing the punches. And I think here is where you really see the maturation of Rocky Marciano and where he's turning into a great fighter, not just a guy that's running through people.
Well, Charlie Goldman, I'm glad he's in the International Hall of Fame, all that kind of stuff. Terrific trainer. Marciano did learn to box, or he learned more skills. He originally just had a right. He tried to hit you with a right, like Tyson, just try to hit you. And then he learned a left, and he learned other skills. He learned to stay low in the crouch. He wasn't the easiest guy to hit in the head, all kinds of things. And with Harry Matthews, the thing about Marciano, he sparred 82 rounds, even though he knocked out Matthews in 2. This guy always showed up in terrific shape, and he was the one they asked about, Ali, and Ali saying, he can more and forward, he could claim his rounds. And they said to Marciano, can you name how many rounds you're going to knock out your opponent? He goes, no, I never think I can knock out my opponent. I always think it's going to go the distance, and I always prepare that it's going to go the distance. So he really did show up. He was an athlete. He always showed up in terrific shape. And, hey, if he could knock out a guy like Harry Matthews in 2 rounds, that's even better. But he prepared that these things went longer.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the Jersey Joe Walcott fight, the first fight, where Marciano's Susie Q, the big, powerful right hook, maybe the greatest one-punch knockout in boxing history. We will be back after this word from MyBookie.
Hey, everyone, my name is Alex Golden. I am the host of the Courtroom Podcast, an NBA debate show here at the Grueling Truth. And I'm here with one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money. The Grueling Truth has partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And that's why the Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag. In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now, and MyBookie.ag will give you a 50% bonus on first deposit for up to $3,000 in extra playing money. Just enter promo code TGT50. That's TGT50 to take advantage of this offer. Visit MyBookie.ag, courtesy of the Grueling Truth Network, and enjoy winning today. MyBookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, we're back on the old-time boxing show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation and MyBookie.ag. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, with the Grueling Truth boxing historian, Christopher Shelton. Now, Chris, we're up to one of the greatest heavyweight championship fights of all time. And anybody that thinks Klitschko and Joshua was a legendary heavyweight fight needs to go watch this fight. Rocky Marciano comes out in the first round. There's still people to question how good he is. And Jersey Joe Walcott, within a minute, has him on the ground. And Walcott really dominates the first 2 or 3 rounds of this fight. And it really, if you're living in 1952, 53, and you're watching this, you're thinking kind of like people were in the early 2000s about Michael Grant for the first round or 2.
Well, Marciano is definitely up against a different caliber opponent, And a guy like Jersey Joe Walcott probably looks bad for Marciano as far as styles, because Walcott's real smart. He's been in the ring a long time. He knows how to keep his hand keeping Marciano away and then hitting him really hard, knocks Marciano down, first time Marciano's been knocked down, and also has a different kind of footwork that Marciano's not used to. And Marciano does remember Romany Dempsey because he's always still figuring him out. He's like working on Joe Walcott's mind while Walcott's dominating a little bit, and that Marciano never seems to lose confidence. He knows he's going to stand in there, he's going to keep whatever he can do to throw punches, and that Walcott, I don't know what would have happened if Walcott was 29, but he was about 38. Allegedly, he might have been older. And Marciano was facing a tougher, stronger, smarter guy, but Marciano is no chump. He goes in there ready to fight.
Yet if you watch the fight, he just relentlessly comes at Walcott. And I think around the 6th or 7th round, you can see it's starting to get to Walcott a little bit. And Walcott had that trademark feint he would throw to set up the right hand. And he was hitting, Marciano with shots as hard as you'll see anybody get hit with. And Marciano just kept coming. And that Susie Q, we talked about the right hook, he hit Walcott with that a lot from the 7th round to the 12th round. The difference was he was hitting the end of the punch, if you know what I mean. So you had the 68-inch reach, which would come up, and he's catching Walcott right at the end of it. But you get to the 13th round, Walcott's moving forward, and Marciano catches with him, and it's a short punch, and it's about as devastating as any punch anybody's ever landed.
I think it's one of the great knockouts of boxing history. It's sort of reflected that way. And then Marciano, especially our British audience, which we greatly appreciate. But one of the things I think about Marciano is that Marciano's a little dirty. And so after he's knocked out Marciano, he kind of throws another punch at him, even though the guy's basically unconscious on the ropes. And, but I think because Walcott's such a good boxer that you forget he's a hard puncher. He knocked Joe Louis down 3 times, first guy to knock down Marciano. These guys are trading hard blows. And they're hurting each other's eyes, so they're both having a little trouble seeing, and they're putting substances in each other's eyes. And then, when Marciano in the 13th round lands that right, you can't believe a guy is standing unconscious. Walcott's basically not going to the ground, but he's hanging onto the ropes, and he doesn't know where he is. It's devastating, and I guess for boxing fans, we think it's great on some level.
Yeah, and then we look at the rematch, which I think the rematch is where I started to really think about how everybody, once they fight Marciano, they're done. I mean, when you look at it, the second fight, I think that Jersey Joe, he got his biggest payday ever, and I think he was there to get that payday. No shot on him because I don't blame him for it. He deserved it. But he didn't want to mess with him anymore. And you watch him take that 10 count. As soon as he gets to 10, he jumps up. And he does not complain. He starts to walk around the ring. And then when the crowd starts booing, then all of a sudden he starts acting like he still wants to fight. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want any part of fighting Rocky Marciano again, because to beat Marciano, you had to go through absolute hell. At least I assume, because nobody ever beat him.
No, I think actually, and it's not like you and I just get together and agree on everything. Actually, we think it's great if we disagree. But we agree on a lot of stuff, and this is one of them, that a lot of guys didn't want to fight Marciano, and it was their last time. And I think Walcott's last time was the first fight. But there was another payday ahead of him, and he was going to take that payday. But he was going to take a relentless, brutal beating from this guy. He got hit hard, he went down, and he stayed down. And then you're right, he kind of jumped up like he really wanted to keep fighting, but he didn't want to keep fighting. He was like several guys that said, "That's it. I'm not going through this. It's not worth it. The money's not worth it." Though he took the money.
All right, then we had the rematch with La Starza. And of course, the first fight was a split decision, or a close fight. It was a split decision. The second fight, Marciano comes in betting odds. He's a 4-1 favorite. And I think this is a fight where, once again, La Starza wasn't as competitive the second time. He was a young fighter still, but I think Rocky really showed how much he had improved.
Yeah, and again, somewhere around 6 rounds, The judges' cards are really in Lustar's favor. Apparently, he's a really handsome guy. I don't know about stuff like that. And then somewhere after the 6th round, Marciano starts giving him a real serious beating. And this guy, is supposed to be a good boxer. He's a good boxer, but he didn't want to take it anymore. Marciano was beating him and beating him and beating him senseless. And that's it, By the 11th round, this thing is done, and it's one more guy that held up to Marciano for a little while, and then took a relentless beating. We did Jerry Quarry, and I thought the interesting thing, if I compare Quarry versus Marciano, is that Quarry always seemed to come out pretty well for the first couple of rounds against guys like Joe Frazier and stuff like that. Marciano's always comes out well, but he has a relentless energy. So while the other guy tires, Marciano doesn't tire. Marciano is the same guy in the fifth round as the first round, and the same guy in the 10th round as the 5th round and first round. He's just like an animal or a bear, which I don't mean to make fun of him, but I mean he's like relentless. He's like a machine or an animal. He just keeps coming out, clubbing and clubbing and clubbing and clubbing, and the other guy at some point gives in or can't take it anymore.
Well, see, and the thing that impressed me about this fight was I think he changed the style of his fight in like the 6th or 7th round, because he was out there throwing big punch after big punch just trying to knock him out. And from the 7th round through the end, there was a lot more combinations, a lot more hooks and combination punches.
Well, and also I got to say this again, because I know the British media against Marciano is pretty strong when it comes to Don Cockle, which we'll get to later. But I will say Marciano was warned over and over and over by the referee for this illegal thing, that illegal thing, another illegal thing. I don't know if Marciano was cheating, but he kind of just came out there and did what he was going to do, and warning after warning after warning, and no punishment for all those warnings. So I will give the stars of that I guess Marciano fought dirty, though I'm not sure he was cheating, but it's nasty. And you're right, he's trying to use boxing, and he's also throwing at all angles, and he's being warned about hitting after the bell, hitting low, hitting this way and that way that's wrong. He got warned about 8 times with Estarza.
Yeah, well, my problem with that is it's called a freaking fight for a reason. So sometimes shit happens.
I love what Tommy Morrison said. He said, shit, it's boxing. When he said, hey, what about George Foreman hitting you low? Shit, it's boxing. I expect that shit.
Yeah, and then next up, he fights another legend, the legendary Ezzard Charles. For my money, one of the 2 or 3 best light heavyweights of all time. Great fight. Ezzard Charles gave him a hell of a fight. And Charles is winning the fight in through about the 10th, 11th round. And then Marciano's will just comes back and basically pulls it out again.
Well, you're a Cincinnati man, so I love calling Ezzard Charles the Cincinnati Cobra, since that was his nickname. And you're right, he definitely got the edge on Marciano in the early rounds, and then it's kind of the same thing you keep seeing repeating, that Marciano's, tactics, which are wailing, throwing punches, they just wear you down. And Ezzard Charles was amazing. Ezzard Charles refused to fall down. It was like still Ezzard Charles, who heavyweight champion, former at least, and he just wouldn't fall down to Marciano. But Marciano was clubbing away, and Ezzard Charles lasted 15 rounds, and the only person that lasted distance with Marciano for a while, over the last couple of years of his career.
Yeah, the only guy to go 15 rounds with him.
Yeah, I mean, as Charles 15 rounds with Rocky Marciano, and it really looks like Charles should go down. He just won't. There's something in his pride of what he is as a boxer, and a light heavyweight genius, and yet a heavyweight champion to be reckoned, and really got the best of Marciano in the early rounds, and then he's just wearing down because of Marciano's relentless fighting.
Yeah, and then we had a rematch, of course, and Marciano kind of dominated that a little bit more until a turn of fortune kind of changed Charles's way in the 6th. They were emerging from a clinch. Marciano got a nasty cut on the tip of his nose, and Ezzard from there on made that the target of his aggression. Also punched for a cut that opened besides Rocky's left eye in the 8th. But once again, Marciano showed what kind of fighter he was, and a fight that a lot of guys would have lost because of those cuts. Marciano comes and knocks him out.
Yeah, if nothing else, Marciano probably is in pain with those nose injuries, though when you watch these things and what they say is if it's the eye, that's really serious and you may have to stop it. if it's the nose, and that's what Charles had really done, broken or cut his nose, it's incredibly painful, but you don't have to stop the fight, and that's what Charles had done. He was making Marciano bleed. He kept pecking away at the nose and hurting him, and Marciano was in a lot of pain, but, Marciano's a relentless guy, and this time Charles did not go the distance. This time he knocked Charles down a couple times, and Charles didn't get up. That was it.
Yeah, and I think how we talked about how he ended guys like Charles and Walcott and Matthews, all these guys' careers, how they were never the same. I think the two fights with Charles and the fight with Walcott, the fights with La Starza, they shortened Rocky's career too. And I think that really started to show up May 16th of 1955 at Kezar Stadium in San Francisco, where Marciano beats Don Cockle 54 seconds of round 9. Did not look that great doing it. And let's face it, Cockle was not a big-time heavyweight challenger. At least he wasn't to me. I know Cockle and all his fans still whine because Marciano was a little bit rough, but
all right, let's go ahead and give the English people their thing. They think Marciano cheated. They think Marciano's a bad guy. They complain to American everything. And the reality is, Cockle, first of all, didn't even look like a boxer. He looks in such bad shape, I could take him on. I'm just joking, But Marciano battered him around, and I didn't see anything so illegal or so horrible about Marciano. I mean, La Starza fans, which they're not that many, La Starza fans have a right to complain about Rocky Marciano. Don Cockle fans need to shut up. He beat the shit out of this guy, and they complained about it then, and they complain about it now. Marciano beat the crap out of him. That's what happened.
Yeah, Don Cockle would have needed a shotgun to win that fight.
And even that, I don't know if he'd win.
Yeah, he better not miss on his first shot. But my point is this: if somebody's hitting you low, hitting you after the bell, hit them back, hit them low. Don't be a pussy.
Yeah, and Marciano's just walking out there and clubbing away. He's not really, like I said, with referee warnings with the Starza, I can really think, you know what, you were kind of, I don't know what, this cheating or anything, but it was a lot of warnings. Cockle, I didn't see that. I really saw him just beating this guy senseless, and that the only way Cockle could win is with a shotgun, just like you said, or something, or getting a disqualification on Marciano. But that would have been ridiculous. To take Marciano's crown away, an undefeated fighter, on a disqualification from Don Cockle is ridiculous.
All right, then came his final bout against the great Archie Moore, another guy just like Ezra Charles, one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time. Moore was supposedly 38 years old. Nobody will ever really know. He was somewhere between 38 and 97. The bout was originally scheduled for September 20th, but hurricane warnings delayed the bout. Marciano was actually knocked down for a 4 count in the second round, but as always, he recovered. Basically walked Moore down, knocked him out in the 9th round to finish his career 49-0 with 43 knockouts. He retired April 27th, 1956 at the age of 32. But the Moore fight's another one he gets crap for because everybody said he was old. It's still Archie Moore. Archie Moore was a great fighter.
And Archie Moore had better reach. Archie Moore weighed more. I mean, because you think Archie Moore is a light heavyweight, great, which he is. You think, oh, well, Marciano, a heavyweight versus a light heavyweight. Not exactly. I mean, Archie Moore weighed more than Marciano going into that fight, and had a larger reach than Marciano. And Moore had a plan. He kept begging for this fight. And the fact that he could knock Marciano down says, hey, you know what? He deserved to get this fight, but he put out wanted posters on Rocky Marciano, kept saying Marciano was chicken to fight him, Marciano was avoiding him. So Archie Moore got his chance, one of the greats of all time. And Rocky Marciano didn't take on a chump. It's just that he beat another guy. You're right, he was a little bit older. And every time Marciano won, they found a way to make it a flaw. Oh, you fought somebody old. You fought somebody that wasn't that good. It was like anything Marciano did, after he's won, they discredited the opponent, and that was one more. Archie Moore.
They still discredit him to this day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you get Marciano considered a comeback in 1959. And the interesting thing here is I saw where he actually went and trained somewhere in the middle of that year for a month, and he said that he just couldn't bring himself to do it the way he used to. So he retired instead of facing Ingemar Johansson. If you notice, nobody begged him to fight Floyd Patterson between 56 and 59.
Right. That's kind of funny because I think Floyd Patterson would be a good match for Marciano, but you're right.
I don't see how it would, because Patterson against Liston, I mean, let's face it, he wasn't Patterson to me is kind of like a Ken Norton. If you got a big, heavy puncher in front of him, he's going to have a problem. Now, Patterson might have been able to box him and stay away from him for a while, but in a 15-round fight, Marciano's going to walk him down and knock him out.
No, actually, we're miscommunicating a little bit, because I thought when I said that Patterson was a good opponent for Marciano, I meant from Marciano's viewpoint. I thought that, hey, I think Marciano could beat this guy and could continue being heavyweight champion for a little while. But as you said, Marciano, when it came to fighting Johansson or thinking about fighting Johansson, that he took a month in training and said, I just don't have that hunger. It's just not there. And I will say, I'd love to see Marciano versus Joe Frazier, even though Frazier's a little bit bigger. Marciano's in terrific shape when he came to these fights. His training was unbelievable. And so when he says, I did it for a month and I'm just not there, the hunger isn't there, the whatever I got to do, I'm not going to be the same guy. That's why he ended up undefeated, because if he just had gone in there not really ready, he's going to get beat by somebody.
Yeah, and after retirement, he entered the world of television. I remember he first appeared on the combat episode Masquerade, which was one of my favorite shows when I was little.
Yeah.
And I know he also worked as a wrestling referee. He was a boxing commentator. I think he had his own TV show for a short period in 1961 also. And that brings us to the 1969 shit show, which was done by Murray Warner. The Rocky Marciano versus Muhammad Ali super fight. And from what I remember, that Warner was a guy that started a fantasy radio boxing tournament to determine the best heavyweight of all time. In 1968, Sports Illustrated actually wrote a piece about the tournament and hailed it as one of the most astonishing marketing successes in radio history. Warner said it brought to our wondering ears via radio and computer the all-time heavyweight tournament and championship fight. It took the 16th, what they considered the 16 best boxers from John L. Sullivan to Muhammad Ali. It used a computer, which I don't think anybody had done for this before. And they had the tournament, and the tournament did really well. But the problem was the tournament had James J. Jeffries beating Muhammad Ali. Ali actually sued Warner and won like $1 million. But, of course, by the time we get to 69, Marciano's board, Ali's board, they come up with this crazy-ass computer super fight, which the thing that was interesting to me is the fight, if you watch it, it's basically both of these guys trying not to hit each other in the head, just tapping each other in the stomach. And the thing that was funny, I read about it, and I've seen a little bit in the outtakes, but when Ali would accidentally hit him in the head, if it would mess up his toupee, Marciano would yell, cut, and then tell Ali to lay off his toupee.
Well, I didn't know that, but I will say just from my own little experience and stuff. Now, I did not see it in 1969. I remember as a little kid, though, seeing this, and I wouldn't watch the whole thing again now for what we do, but I remember sort of thinking, hey, Marciano's fighting, Ali? That's very strange. Aren't they from the wrong everything? And then when I kind of just saw a little bit now, I go, well, Marciano looks like a retired fighter. He does not look like Rocky Marciano, since I'm watching a lot of Marciano fights. Looks a little bit heavy, looks a little bit big. As you said, a toupee. He looks like an older, graying man. He's really not that old, but for a boxer and for him, he doesn't look in great shape. It looks like you don't really want to fight Muhammad Ali right now. Muhammad Ali's in unbelievable shape, and he's really pissed off at the government. And Marciano would probably struggle with him in 1969. If that was the year. I'm
pretty sure. Anybody struggles with Ali in 1969. The thing that got me was this. When you look at it, this was shown in theaters like a pay-per-view or closed-circuit event. The thing that was really bad is when people know that the blood from Marciano's cuts to his nose and forehead were actually ketchup, and Ali wrote that my glove never hit his face, his glove never hit mine. The promoter asked me if I could think of some ending, and I planned the one that was actually used. I showed Rocky how to hit me, and I fall as though it's real. We have 7 different endings, some with me winning, some with Rocky winning. some segments we fake so good that they are left untouched by the editors, and they just let it go. So
yeah, I think it's too bad. I think the whole thing, I kind of wish didn't happen. I grew up as, like I said, a little kid seeing it, never really seen it completely since. But I think, unfortunately, it looks like, oh, they made up a film and then had the white guy beat the black guy, even though Marciano's Latino, so it's not quite that simple. But it kind of looks like, oh, we fixed the ending so that the black guy we really want to see lose, Ali was undefeated at the time, and we knocked him out. We couldn't knock him out with a real opponent, so we knocked him. We made a film and scripted it so he's knocked out. And I think it is sort of grotesque. But, you know, what are you going to do?
My question here is, when you look at this, all right, I don't think that it was because people wanted to see Ali lose. I think it's because they want to see the old champion win. And he was white, he was black, so
I think both.
You know, it kind
and you're right. Ali Marciano is a very likable guy because even if you did stuff like made fun of him about, oh, you just fought a bunch of chumps or has-beens or stuff, Marciano wasn't the kind of guy that was a loudmouth or got mad. He took everything pretty much in stride, and because of that, he's a very likable guy. So whatever you think about him, he can handle it. The only thing he worried about was his mom thought. What his mom thought was important. What the rest of us thought, he can live with it.
Yeah, and then, of course, we had the tragic death in 1969. Yeah. I think he was only 46 years old. But before that, the other thing that I found interesting about the Marciano match with Ali was how Ali wrote in his autobiography that they actually became friends, and Ali felt really close to Marciano by the time they were done.
I didn't know that, but I will say that Ali liked people in general, and that Marciano came across as a very likable guy. So the fact that they could hang out and get along wouldn't surprise me at all.
All right, so August 31st, 1969, just a few months after that fight, or fake fight. And my fake fight story is this. I think it was like 1978. We had the blizzard of 77 and 78. And for some reason, the local CBS affiliate was supposed to show the Ali Marciano computer fight at like 2 o'clock in the morning. All right? And it was on a Sunday night. It would have been going into Monday morning. And I remember watching the NFC Championship game. The Cowboys come back and beat the Rams 28-0 in the second half.
Oh, shit.
And we got a snowstorm.
I remember that game.
We got a snowstorm. And the thing is, they're saying we're going to get 6 to 8 inches of snow. So it's like freaking midnight or 11 o'clock at night. And I'm sitting there and I'm begging my dad. I said, I want to see this fight. And he says, it's not a real fight. I said, I know, but it's Ali and Marciano. Those were two of my heroes growing up. And I was like 9 or 10 years old. The fight's supposed to be on at 2 o'clock in the morning on the CBS local affiliate. They were showing it. So we had gotten about 3 inches of snow by 11 o'clock at night. My dad watches the news. They say, you know, we're going to get up to 8 inches of snow. He says, all right, you can stay up and watch the fight because obviously there's not going to be school tomorrow. So I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning watching the fight. All right, I watch this whole fight. It's like 5 o'clock. I go to bed. At about 7 o'clock, my mom comes in shaking me. She says, we got school. It stopped snowing last night at that time. And I knew it had stopped snowing. But it wasn't like I was going to go to bed and miss this. I didn't have a VCR yet. And I wanted to see this damn fight. And if I wouldn't have saw it then, I never would have saw it until I bought it on a DV like 4 or 5 years ago. So that's my story.
You just depressed my day reminding me the Cowboys beat the Rams in the playoffs 28-0 with Pearson scoring all those touchdowns. I remember that.
And that was nothing to nothing at halftime. And the Rams were finally favored to beat them because they'd blown out the Vikings 34-14 the week before.
That defense of ours, Youngblood, Dreyer, Olsen, what's going on?
Hey, you have to check it out. I had Fred Dreyer on the show a couple years ago.
Oh, you know what? That man's a star. San Diego State with Carl Weathers and stuff, and all those great coaches. They had Gibbs and Madden and Coryell, all those guys.
They had everybody there. And they won a lot of games that way, too. And then
you and I, we love sports. We're doing Marciano, and then we still remind ourselves of football and this and that and this and that. And that's kind of what we do. You know, and it was enjoyable to watch Rocky Marciano, just to watch him out there clubbing away and clubbing away and clubbing away for the last couple of weeks was wonderful. You know, I enjoyed watching Marciano fight again.
Yeah, then, unfortunately, August 31st, 1969, I think it was the eve of his 46th birthday. Marciano was a passenger in a small private plane, a Cessna 172, headed to Des Moines, Iowa. Nighttime, weather set in. The pilot had a total of 231 flying hours.
And didn't have the required whatever you need to go through that kind of weather.
Yeah,
I never
he only had
when
35 of them
Marciano,
at night. It was not certified to fly. Chris, shut the fuck up. All right?
Okay.
I'm just kidding, Chris.
No, it's okay.
I was getting to that.
Why be with a pilot who doesn't have the
me.
credentials to take you through the weather?
I know. I was going to get to that part, but you didn't let me finish the sentence. Fucking asshole.
I'll shut the fuck
All right.
up. Go ahead and say
shut the fuck up. That's what I said.
Thank you.
Now don't get all quiet.
Okay. No,
we've had people leave the show before because they get upset because I might tell them to shut the fuck up. But I was just teasing with you.
You're my friend. We're okay about all that. No, I think we're both going to say the same thing. The pilot credentials weren't there. I said it probably before you were going to say it, but that's a problem.
Yeah, and I know he was on his way to give a speech, I think, to support his friend's son. There was a birthday celebration waiting for him. He hoped to return early in the morning for that 46th birthday celebration. But, of course, things don't always turn out the way we wish. My thing with Marciano is the fact that he gets no respect, really. I mean, and the thing is, I saw a video with Don Turner, who saw him fight. Have you ever seen that video where Don Turner's talking about him?
No, I don't think so.
And Don Turner makes the case that he would beat anybody just because nobody could hold him off for 15 rounds. And he said he hit so damn hard he's never seen anybody, including Ernie Shavers, who we had on the show a couple weeks ago. Ernie Shavers didn't even hit as hard as he did. And he said Marciano would walk through you eventually, wear you out, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves.
I don't think he gets the credit he deserves either. Now, styles always make fights, and one of the things we do in boxing that's fun is we try to argue how would he do against this guy or that guy. Obviously, because he always, had a reach disadvantage and was under 200, I don't like his chances against George Foreman. But I gotta say, all you can do is who you fought. Marciano
but how about
didn't
this?
avoid
How about
anybody.
this? Real quick. I know the size advantage is huge there, but if you're talking about a young George Foreman, if he doesn't knock Marciano out in 2 or 3 rounds, he's not beating him.
That you may be right. When Marciano hits you, he really hits you, and even George Foreman would probably be the first to say that I don't want to get hit by this guy, because if you do, it's a different story. And anybody had to face Marciano had to deal with actually taking his punishment, and Marciano's punishment was severe. And one of the things you and I both agree on, and we didn't talk about it in advance, is we noticed that guys quit after they fought Marciano and didn't want to fight ever again.
Yeah, he broke your will. I mean, he's kind of like the football team that comes out, like the old Oklahoma Sooners, where they just run the ball down your throat, and they just pound on you until you give up. And when I see him, I mean, to me, there's no doubt in my mind that he is at the very worst in the top 10, and I think he's a top 3 or 4 heavyweight of all time.
His knockout ratio is amazing, and he only struggled really maybe a little bit with boxers who were awkward and had footwork and things like that. But this guy was fun to watch because he's a hard guy. He's a hard puncher, but he's also just incredibly physical training. He always came in like this thing is going to last a while. It didn't usually, but he came in ready and prepared. And the minute he knew it wasn't there, he's not ready, he quit. He said, I can't do it, but as long as he prepared and trained, he was going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and I think that he deserves to be in the top 5 just from the fact nobody beat him. He beat Ezra Charles. Nope. He beat Jersey Joe Walcott. And Walcott, at the age of 37 in that first fight, that's as good as Walcott ever was. I mean, Walcott, if you look at his career, was better at 37 than he was 27.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. There are certain kind of guys who have an awkward sports career, like
Bernard
a Dean
Hopkins.
Chance, who's better in their 30s. And I think, Hopkins too, a great example. But I think Walcott was a better fighter in his 30s than in his 20s. And Marciano beat a great fighter, not a guy that was over the hill and done. He fought a great fighter and got the best of it.
Yeah, so in the end, I mean, why does he not get the respect he deserves?
I don't know. I mean, it's just people make their decisions, and they make their decisions on whatever they decide, sort of. And you and I just try to be honest. If we thought Marciano was overrated, we would say that. That's not our impression after watching him fight and who we thought were his opponents. We thought he took on everybody he had to take on and did a fantastic job, and did everything he had to do. And then some people want to put him down for this reason or that reason. That's on them.
But what do you think those reasons are?
I can't really say. The only thing I can say is that he, even with Johansson on the scene, I look back and I just thought that there was mostly. I grew up that every great heavyweight was black, and there really weren't white guys that were great, except for, you heard in the past, there's Rocky Marciano guy, and then there's a Swedish guy who had a couple moments, and I just think that for whatever reason, he's disparaged in a way that, again, it's hard for me to say, because when he fought these guys, a lot of times he was the underdog, and then he won, and they called the guy a has-been.
See, I think that it's real easy to say why he's not respected,
and
it's because he was white.
I think that has something to do with it, and
I think it's everything to do with it, because there's nothing else you can rip on the guy. He never lost. He
never lost, and he didn't avoid guys. There's you can get mad at Larry Holmes for not fighting this guy or that guy or whoever you want to get mad at. It's hard to get on Marciano because he didn't avoid anyone, and if he had hung in there another year, he would have beat Patterson. You and I believe he would have beat that. Patterson was not the right guy to beat him.
Ingemar Johansson wouldn't have beat him. Sonny Liston wouldn't have beat him, because the thing is this. Mike Tyson wouldn't beat him. There, I said it. Mike Tyson wouldn't have, because Mike Tyson's not going to be able to walk through hell with him. And he may be bigger, but I think the thing about Marciano is I saw an interview also where they asked him why he wouldn't get knocked out. And this is the same thing. I interviewed Wayne McCullough, the great bantamweight champion, super bantamweight champion, yesterday. And I asked him, too, because he was never knocked down. And what he said to me is what I believe is completely true. And that was this. He said, I just made up my mind that I wasn't going to be knocked out.
Well, I can say this, that I can't swear that Marciano would beat Sonny Liston, but I can say that a lot of guys went against Sonny Liston were afraid of him when they stepped into the ring.
And
I do not think Marciano would be afraid.
Sonny Liston, Mike Tyson, same to me. Tell me a time Sonny Liston was about to lose and he came back and won.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think Marciano, if nothing else, isn't going to be afraid of Sonny Liston, and that part of what Sonny Liston brought to the ring was people being afraid of him. So I don't know if Marciano could beat him, but I know he wouldn't be afraid of him, and that alone is an advantage.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing. About the other guy I saw fight Liston who wasn't afraid of him was Ali, and Ali had no problem.
Yeah, Ali always went at, in his own psychological head, whatever he brought to the table, Ali was Ali, and there's nobody like him. As far as, Rocky Marciano, I think Marciano probably get hung on as champion 2-3 years, unless he really believes he's not training right, or he really believes it's just not in me to do this anymore. But I think he probably could have been champion for at least a couple more years. But he got out. He said, I'm undefeated. I've had a good career, and I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah, let's face it. If he stays another year or two, and one of these young guys does get him because he's not training the way he was, he would really –
the hunger.
Nobody would even consider him up there. But, this is the thing. If he was, a rapist who hung out with rappers, he would be considered a legend. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Mike Tyson didn't accomplish what Rocky Marciano did. But on most forums you go on, if you say Mike Tyson would have killed – or if you say Rocky Marciano would have beat Mike Tyson – they'll laugh at you and tell you you're stupid. But those same people will laugh at you and tell you you're stupid if you tell them Muhammad Ali would have beat Mike Tyson. And I can tell you this, Muhammad Ali, Rocky Marciano, George Foreman, Evander Holyfield, Larry Holmes. When I list the guys that I think are the 10 best, there's not one of them there that had an ounce of quit in them at any time. They would never think about biting another man on the ear so he didn't get his ass knocked out. They wouldn't tap out against guys like Danny Williams and Kevin McBride, no matter how old they were. And when I'm picking my top 10, Mike Tyson never makes it. Rocky Marciano could never be out of it. Evander Holyfield could never be out of it because they were warriors. And when I watch the old guys fight, the guys that stand out to me that I like to watch fight the most are Evander Holyfield, Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, because these guys would go to war. and they would not back down. And that's something you cannot say. Put it like this: Mike Tyson, everybody says, well, in his prime, like in 86, 87, Mitch Green and Buster Bone Crusher Smith grabbed onto him and danced with him for 10 and 12 rounds, and he couldn't figure out how to get him out of there. I don't think that would ever happen against the Rocky Marciano.
I think, the important thing is, in my mind, because you're defending who would fight who and what time and what situation, Marciano always took boxing very seriously. He always came into every fight well-trained, ready to go. He was learning, Charlie Goldman was teaching him to do other things, as far as making him a little harder to hit and using his left a little bit more and all kinds of things. And when Marciano said, you know what, that hunger isn't there. He could have not fought for 2 or 3 years and just hung on to the championship like a lot of boxers do, and he didn't. He really went out undefeated with class, and I think he would have beat, Patterson if he fought him. But he didn't. He said, that's it. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to stop.
People forget also, his first amateur fight was in 1946. His last pro fight was in 1956.
Yeah, he did everything you could expect him to do. He didn't lose a fight, and they really weren't all that close unless you talk about the Stars' first fight, which was at best a draw, and it went Marciano's way because of the knockdowns. And the Stars didn't knock down Marciano. Marciano knocked down the Stars. So even if that's his closest fight, he still got the better of the guy.
All right, Chris, next Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern, we will be live with the top 10 boxing movies of all time. So now Chris has got to go start watching a bunch of boxing movies over the next few days.
Yeah, I got to watch Burt Lancaster, and I think I'm going to actually have to try to see if I can see Fred McMurray in a boxing match. That's going to be something.
I don't think you got to watch that. What's the name of that movie?
I don't know. I just found that the other day.
Probably not in the top 10 then.
I don't see Fred McMurray knocking out Chip, let alone another boxer.
No. Plus, I think number one has to be Matilda the Boxing Kangaroo from 1979 with Elliot Gould. So
Woody Allen used to fight kangaroos for a little while on the comedy stage.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind you tomorrow at noon Eastern live, I will be here on the Boxing Legends Show with former heavyweight champion Larry Holmes. Tomorrow night, live at 8 o'clock Eastern, I'll be with former heavyweight contender who fought Mike Tyson, so we can talk about that a little bit, Jose Ribalta. So make sure you check all that out. Also, go to iTunes. You can download the Grueling Truth app so you can hear all of the shows. Tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern, we'll have the NFL Pick'em Show. We have, of course, myself, Matt Andrew Scavage, Brian Schmidt on. Also, former Denver Bronco offensive lineman in Super Bowl 21, Mark Cooper, will be with us. And Jeff Christensen, who played in the NFL as a quarterback from 1983 through 1987 with the Bengals and the Buccaneers. He is also better known as the quarterback guru, as he is the private quarterbacks coach for Jimmy Garoppolo, Patrick Mahomes, and half of the quarterbacks in the NFL. So make sure you check us out tonight on the NFL Pick'em Show. See if we can get some games right for this weekend. Remember, if you want to pick those games, go to mybookie.ag. So, for Christopher Shelton, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.